what is a camera review video without some photos? So hey, I thought I would show you some of the shots I've done with the Z6ii, some of my more recent shoots. Now I've done about 50 client shoots, and you can see the images right here in various lighting scenarios. We've done outdoor, indoor. I've done some with my DIY ring light. I've done just a variety of shoots with just, you know, your client headshots for a LinkedIn type shot, and then even some more artistic shots that are more creative and editorial. So I've run the gamut, and I love it. I love the Z6ii. It's been absolutely fantastic, and I wanted to cover just a few key points that I've run into with using the Z6ii exclusively to see whether they were maybe better or worse than my last video, or just to sort of expand on some of the things that I've run into. So that's what this video is going to be about, so let's give it a whirl. Hey everyone, this is Mike here with Mike McGee Photography. Okay, my previous video, the D750 versus Z6ii, whether it was worthy of an upgrade, I'll put a link in the upper right hand corner to that video. But I ended that video basically hedging my bets. I said I'm going to keep the Z6ii as my main shooter, and I was going to keep the D750 as my backup. I thought that would be a nice little hedging of the bets, as I said. So in case something didn't work out, I could go back to the D750. That was sort of my tried and true years of experience on that machine, and go back to it if necessary. Well, I did the opposite. The Z6ii is so good, I sold my backup D750. Again, much love for the D750, and if you're just starting out in photography or you want the most bang for the economical buck, you gotta go with the D750 if you're still in the DSLR world. But I am now fully invested in the Z6ii because yes, absolutely, it is a worthy upgrade from the D750. So now my main shooter, which is recording this video right now, is my Z6ii, and this is my backup Z6ii. It's great. It's even better than expected, and in my video I thought there were some things that were great, but it's even exceeded expectations with a couple of firmware updates since my last video. I have had more time exclusively with the Z6ii, and I kind of wanted to do a follow-up review video on the Z6ii exclusively, sort of some more pros and cons that I may have run into, as well as just giving you honest feedback about the Z6ii as a portrait shooter. So that's what this video is all about, and more information coming up next. All right, so let's start with the focus system. Now, the focus system, I went into details on breaking down each and every focus system of the Z6ii. I'm not going to do that, but what I really wanted to focus on is how I've had to change my mindset going from a D750 to the Z6ii. Now, with the D750, I used to shoot exclusively the AFS, the single servo, and then I would use single point focus, and I briefly discussed that in my video. But what I would do is I would manually find the eye, I would find sort of that focus point and use the joystick sort of it becomes second nature, but you just move that little box around. This is with the D750, and I would find that box. Well, I thought when I was going to move to the Z6ii that I would just follow that same scenario and just go with single servo and then select single point focus and just find that eye. Well, the autofocus of the Z6ii, the eye autofocus, the automatic eye autofocus, is so good. Now I am shooting in continuous mode. Again, because the eye autofocus of the Z6ii is so good, and as I mentioned, there's been a firmware update since my last video, I think 2 firmware updates. It is really, really impressive. It's so good that you almost get used to it. It's like someone going from a manual stick shift to an automatic with maybe paddle shifters, and you're just so used to it that it's a little scary at first, because I'm thinking, wow, what if the autofocus doesn't work? Am I even going to be able to default back to the sort of single servo, even find the joystick? Because I'm really not using the joystick. I say the joystick, but I really mean the keypad or the joypad? I don't know. I'm just the up, down, left, right arrows on the back. But one thing you definitely want to keep in mind is that in my experience of doing quite a few shoots now with the Z6ii is that you don't want to become overly dependent upon the eye and face auto detect. Now, in certain cases, I've done shoots where a model or client will turn their head to the side, and I'm almost shooting from like a side view, a profile view, but even if I go a little bit farther on that axis to where I'm shooting almost behind the ear, then of course the eye and face auto detect of the Z6ii is not going to be able to map that face properly because you're almost shooting from the back, and then things will wig out. And you can see on screen right there that anything that is in red, those red squares are definitely where the eye autofocus is not being able to pick up the eye. So if you do become a little too dependent upon the eye autofocus system, then you may be out of luck if something like this were to happen. So you do definitely want to be familiar with the AFS mode and maybe even the single point focus mode, because that's what I default back to if I sort of anticipate a shoot is going to be either from the side or maybe even from the back. I'm doing some interesting angles from the back of the ear or something like that, and it's more of a landscape kind of vibe with a model in front of that. Sort of in the foreground, but not really as the focal point of the image. So just keep those things in mind, that if you become too dependent upon AFC and the eye autofocus, you may run out of luck if you're doing certain angles. Now, I am a little almost worried that I become too dependent upon that eye autofocus system. However, from a professional photographer's standpoint, it's so good that you get so many more keepers. I'm gonna go and say roughly approximately 50% more, maybe even more, maybe even 60% more shots on an average shoot. So let's say when I would do a portrait session, I know each person has a different cadence on how they shoot. I usually, on my D750, imagine this is a D750, I would be having to find that eye every time. So I would have to lock that focus, find the eye, lock it with the back button focus, and fire. So my cadence was more like pop, pop, pop. It was kind of like that was pretty much as fast as I could go, because there would be subtle adjustments and I'd have to either lock and reposition or lock and reposition. So it was like pop, pop, pop. Now, the camera itself is doing an eye autofocus continuously in continuous mode. So now, I mean, I can just fire away and it's just pop, 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 pop if I really wanted to. You're catching more moments, especially when you're trying to go, let's say, lifestyle modeling, and someone's laughing and they're giving that chuckle where it has a little too much of a laugh at first, and then when they come down, sort of come down off that wave, you get that perfect smile that's a very natural smile. That's not a Sears Portrait Studio super cheesy smile, and you almost need to fire a little bit more of a staccato kind of pop, pop, pop to capture those moments. Well, I'm capturing far more moments simply because the eye autofocus is so darn good with the Z6ii. So yes, I need more hard drive space, because my shoots that normally would be about, I don't know, 500 shots in one session, let's say, maybe now I'm shooting like 1,100 to 1,200 shots even, because I'm just getting so many more keepers. But I view something like that as a good problem to have. You can always buy more hard drive space. I don't care about that. I care about getting quality shots. And what has this done? The Z6ii has allowed me to create more shots, more quality shots that I can go through and really give the client even more options to choose from. So right off the bat, the eye autofocus, you don't want to be dependent on it, but it's almost at the same time, this thing is a computer automatically doing what I was doing by hand, so why wouldn't you? I know the true purist would be like, oh, that's not really photography. You got to shoot manual and you got to shoot manual focus. I get all that, but when it's paying the bills and you want to get your client as many quality images as possible, the eye autofocus is the way to go. So I've become dependent upon that, and it's just fantastic. And until I see otherwise, why not continue to use it? So I am absolutely astounded by how good the eye autofocus is with the Z6ii. All right, so speaking of autofocus systems, I thought it would be important to just show you how exactly I shoot my portraits with the Z6ii. Now, I mentioned how I did it, but I want to just show you in detail on how I shoot portraits now in this new continuous mode. So it starts with setting up back button focusing. If somebody's an expert, they probably already know this, but really I'm just going to walk through it's a very simple setting to set up back button focus on your Z6ii. So what you really want to do is hit the menu button. Okay, once you go into the menu button, then you just want to go to the custom settings menu, which is the pencil icon. Then you want to select autofocus, and you want to set the AF activation to the AF on only. You don't want the shutter to actually also handle focusing. You want the shutter to be shutter only. It just pops, it just clicks. So you don't want it to have that half press and then lock focus and then have to press it all the way to click. It's just going to be the shutter to click the shot. And now the AF on button is what you're going to use for your thumb to actually lock focus. But here's the difference, is that I often read online how people they use a very interesting word and they say push. They say push the AF on button and then that will lock focus and then you fire away. But what they always neglect to say is that if you are in the continuous mode, you actually want to push and hold the AF on button while you're in continuous mode. And then what that's doing before you even hit your trigger, it is just constantly locking focus on your subject, whether you move, whether they move towards you, whether they move away from you. So what you want to do is set up that AF on button to lock focus, but when you are in continuous mode, that's what makes this such a powerful focusing mode, is that it will constantly update. And you may even, especially if you're using an adaptive f1.4 85mm lens like I'm using, you can hear the motors constantly going. As the motors are trying to adjust the focus system, you're gonna hear, you know what I mean? You will hear all that. Don't worry, you're not breaking anything. That's exactly what it's intended to do. So what you wanna do is you're constantly locking that focus, and then when you wanna capture that moment, you just click, 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 like that. But you're gonna actually maybe get Nintendo thumb while doing this, but you are just going to be holding that AF on button, at least I'm just describing how I do it, as you fire away, and you are constantly locking focus. So that's why the AFC, the continuous mode, to me is so much more powerful than the single servo, the AFS mode, for portraits, especially if someone isn't even moving that much, but maybe, like I said, they're laughing, they're just making a subtle change to their focal plane. Well, if you're shooting at a shallow depth of field, that eye that may be in focus is just slightly off, and you're catching like a little bit of the side of their temple or something like that, and you're like, oh man, this would be a great shot if I just had it a little bit more in focus. Well, in the continuous mode, if you're holding that down, that's when I found that as I fire away, almost everything is coming out in focus with the new firmware update, and it's been pretty phenomenal with the Z6ii. So that is why I've just migrated from the single servo, single point focusing system for portraits to just continuous mode. And it is kind of, I'm a creature of habit, so it takes me a little bit of time to get used to that. And at first I was like, but this can't be right. I can't be just holding this thing down and firing away. But no, that's what it's intended for. So once you try that, if you guys want to try that, try shooting portraits in that mode and just see the difference in how much the Z6ii is locking that focus each and every time with the eye autofocus for the face detection. It's good. It's really good. So give it a whirl, and at least that's how I shoot my portraits, and hopefully that will maybe give you an idea to shoot your portraits the same way and see if it works for you. So yeah, that's the eye autofocus, and that's how I shoot my portraits now. All right, so what about battery life? Hey, that was one of the benefits of the D750. Obviously, because it's a DSLR, it doesn't require as much battery. It has a true optical viewfinder versus the Z6ii that has a electronic viewfinder, so that means less demands on battery life. However, I always shoot with a battery grip. So I have 2 batteries in my Z6ii, and I just like it for honestly, the ergonomics of shooting portraits. I need a battery grip, and the fact that you can get one with the Z6ii was really the reason why I never even considered the Z6, the original one, without a functional battery grip with an actual trigger on it. Now, how has the battery performed on the Z6ii? And again, I don't want to sound like a shill, but I haven't even thought about the battery. I have 2 batteries when I do portrait shoots, and again, each one can be, my shoots sometimes range from as quick as an hour all the way to like a 5-hour shoot. I don't even think I've used 100% of one of the batteries. I think I've gone down to like, 20% on battery number 1, but I still have 100% on battery number 2. I haven't even thought about battery life this entire time. I've never even been close to expiring both batteries and being like, oh no, what do I have? Do I need a backup battery? No, it feels exactly like my D750 was always solid with battery life, completely solid. But I don't even have additional batteries that. I mean, I have them as options, but I haven't had to use them. So battery life has been fantastic. Now, one area where I thought, haha, I found a glitch or I found a problem with the Z6ii, just so, again, if I make a video like this, I don't sound like a corporate shill. But one issue I did run into with the Z6ii was when recording these videos, when recording video and using battery life. Obviously, if you're not plugged into anything, you're gonna use video just uses battery life. It just expires it quickly. It just really uses that battery life. However, you can use it plugged into an AC adapter. So that was one of the selling points. Well, I would do that, and then I would import my video into my computer and say, there's a very distinct audio buzz because I'm plugged into an AC adapter at the time. This is terrible. Oh no, what am I supposed to do? I tried different cables, I tried different AC adapters, I tried different plugs, I made sure it was 3-prong, 2-prong, all that. I tried all that, couldn't get anything to work. Turns out it was my microphone. So I had an omnidirectional Rode mic, I had a Boya Lav mic, both of them produced in just unsettling audio buzz that was in there. And then now I went to the Rode, the Wireless Go 2, and I used that exclusively, and I almost cringed when I tested it and plugged it in and hit record, did a test, and popped in my car to test the audio, and sure enough, I was like, no audio buzz. It works like a charm. So again, it wasn't the camera at all. It works. So if you run into any sort of annoying audio buzz when using an AC adapter with the Z6ii, take a look at your mic. Actually try to find a mic swap because a lot of people don't have a backup Z6ii. I actually do, so once I was able to say, well, let me try the backup Z6ii, and I tried that, and it still didn't work. And so I thought, okay, both cameras aren't wrong. It has to be something related to the cable, the adapter, the power outlet, or the mic. And sure enough, it was the mic. So even that worked out to ultimately work out in my benefit. And right now, as I'm recording this, it's plugged into AC adapter with a USB-C cable, and it's working fine. So power and battery life, no problem at all. All right, so how about low light? Well, one of the huge benefits of the Nikon D750 is that it is an absolute monster in low light situations. So if you're a wedding photographer and you have a nice little candlelight scenario and it's very dimly lit, you can shoot with the D750 all day and really salvage that imagery just by shooting and then lifting shadows, lifting blacks, lifting exposure, and really getting high quality images even if the lighting scenario is extremely dim. But how about the Z6ii? I haven't noticed any differences whatsoever. And again, don't want to sound like a shill. It's just, I've shot a couple of photo shoots with the Z6ii where they're more the editorial type, where I purposely did some dimly lit scenes, and I was able to salvage just as much as I would with the D750. But I mean, I typically optically try to shoot for a balanced exposure, so I'm not trying to shoot as, let's say, a wedding photographer. I wouldn't run into those situations, but as a portrait photographer, I can kind of control the light a little bit more than other people. If you're an event photographer and it's a dimly lit, or a concert photographer, you may run in or have different experiences than me. So I would love to hear about that in the descriptions below, but I have not noticed any issues whatsoever in low light situations with the Z6ii. So I really would like to hear more from you, but I have read a little bit about the Z7ii as well as like the Z6 and Z7, the original series, having some issues with low light. Again, I don't own those cameras, so I can't speak to that. But with the Z6ii, I can pretty much assure you that if you're shooting portraits, you're not going to have any issues with low light. I haven't, and so it's been performing fantastic. All right, so there you have it. Now that was just a couple of key points I wanted to expand on, sort of a follow-up review from my last Nikon Z6ii review, and just expand on those points that I really wanted to hammer home that are even better than I expected from my last review. Some of that has to do with the firmware updates that Nikon has provided, which frankly have just refined that autofocus system even better and better each time. And some of them are just through experience. I've learned a couple of things and just had to change my ways, sort of a creature of habit, going into the continuous mode exclusively now, and going into mirrorless exclusively now without having a D750 as a backup. So again, as a portrait photographer, these are some of the key points I wanted to point out. But let's say you're a wedding photographer or a concert photographer, event photographer, or what have you. If you have some feedback of some points that I just don't have experience with or have touched upon, if you have any comments, feel free to put them in the comments below. I'd love to hear about it. If you have any questions and that I may be able to answer, feel free to put those in the comments below. I'll do my best to answer those. Hopefully you liked this video and it was beneficial to you. If you do, feel free to click subscribe or give it a thumbs up or what have you. And hope you liked this video, and thanks for watching.